The first shot shattered the stillness like glass. The bullet ripped through my front window, spraying splinters across the room. The girl screamed and ducked, and I shoved her down behind the table before the second volley came. The cabin shook as lid punched into the walls, tearing holes through timber and rattling dishes from the shelves. I dropped to a knee by the window and leveled my Winchester. One of the riders had ridden too close, confident in the dark. My shot dropped him clean off his saddle, his horse bolting wild into the desert. That sent a ripple of curses from the gang, but it only made them angrier. They split into two groups, circling like wolves, their gunfire steady and sharp. Bullets slammed into the shutters, thudded into the door, and peppered the roof. The cabin groaned under the assault, dust shaking loose from the rafters. My ears rang from the constant crack of gunfire, and the acrid stench of gunpowder thickened. The air. "Cellar," I barked, dragging the girl toward the trapdoor beneath the rug. If I could get her underground, I could fight with less worry of a stray bullet finding her. But she shook her head violently, clutching that leather satchel against her chest. Her face was pale, streaked with grime, but her voice came fierce. "If they get this, they'll burn the whole territory to the ground." Her words made me pause. What in hell could be so dangerous in that bag? I wanted to demand answers, but another round of shots ripped through the roof, cutting the question short. I returned fire, picking another rider out of the saddle, and ducked back as glass exploded beside me. Then came the voice. Deep, booming, carried clear through the night. "Hand over the girl, and we'll let you live." Vulture Jack. His voice was as cruel as the stories said, every syllable steeped in arrogance. I could picture him sitting tall on his horse, scarf, hiding the grin he always wore when blood was near. "You'll have to pry her from my cold hands." I roared back, not caring if my voice cracked the night in half. The gang roared with laughter, a sound more chilling than their gunfire. They knew as well as I did that 1 man against 12 didn't stand a chance. Still, I wasn't about to roll over. I fired until the rifle clicked empty, then switched to the Colt. My rounds punched through the dark, forcing them to keep their distance, but my ammo was running low, and the wood of the cabin was splintering fast. Then just as I thought the walls would give and the end was near, I heard it. Another rumble of hoofbeats. For a second my heart sank. Reinforcements. More of the vultures riding in to finish what the others had started. But the girl's head snapped up, and to my shock, she smiled through her fear. "Not theirs," she whispered. Her eyes shone with something fierce, almost triumphant. "They're mine." The second wave of hoofbeats tore across the desert, louder, faster, and coming from the opposite ridge. For a heartbeat, I thought the night itself was mocking me, doubling the number of enemies I had no chance of standing against. But then came the glint of star badges, the cut of clean coats in the moonlight, and the booming crack of rifles fired with precision. Lawmen. The desert exploded in chaos. Bullets hissed through the night, sparks flying off rock and timber as the new riders clashed with the Red Vulture gang. Horses screamed, men shouted, and the once orderly ring around my cabin broke apart as Vulture Jack's men scrambled for cover. I kicked the door open and stepped onto the porch, Winchester hot in my hands. The girl stayed low behind me, clutching that satchel like it was life itself. To my left, I saw a deputy from Dry Creek put a round clean through a vulture's chest. To my right, a rancher from the valley swung his shotgun, dropping 2 more. Red vultures fought like cornered animals, but the surprise had knocked the breath out of them. Inside the cabin, the girl finally unbuckled the satchel. Papers spilled across the table, fluttering in the gun-smoke-filled air. I caught a glimpse before the wind tried to snatch them: ledgers, names, maps, accounts. Every bank job, every payoff, every crooked lawman the gang had in their pocket. She hadn't been running with stolen gold. She was carrying the rope that could hang every last one of them. "You took this from them?" I asked between shots. She nodded, fire in her eyes despite the dirt and blood. "If they keep control, the whole territory falls. This," she held the papers up, "is their empire. Now it's gone." I didn't have time to argue. The fight was boiling over. That was when the door burst wide and Vulture Jack himself stormed through, shotgun blazing. The blast scorched past my head, shattering the mantle. I slammed into him, and we went down hard, fists and boots flying. His strength was brutal, a brute strength born from years of violence. He smashed me against the wall, his eyes gleaming murder above. "That red scarf. This is my land, old man." He spat, raising the shotgun again. I jammed the Colt into his chest, felt the steel press through his coat, and pulled the trigger. The shot roared through the cabin. Vulture Jack staggered, eyes wide in shock, then fell heavy to the floorboards. The red scarf slipped away from his face, and for the first time, he looked like what he truly was: a dying man. Outside, the fight faltered. The gang, seeing their leader fall, broke. Horses bolted, men dropped their guns and fled into the dark. The lower men gave chase, some firing, some letting them scatter like rats. I leaned against the wall, chest heaving, smoke still curling from the Colt. The girl stood in the center of the wreckage, satchel in hand, eyes steady. "You could have shut the door," she said quietly. "Yeah," I muttered, holstering the gun, surveying the ruin of my cabin. "But I didn't." The lawmen gathered the papers, and with them, the fate of the red vultures. My cabin was in splinters, the night heavy with blood and smoke. But I knew one thing. Letting her in had changed everything. And in the Wild West, one choice was all it ever took. The desert at night is never truly silent. Even when the wind dies down, there's always something: an owl hooting from the cottonwoods by the creek, a coyote yipping from the ridges, the restless shuffle of my horse in the corral. That night, though, the quiet felt heavier, stretched tight like a rope ready to snap. I just poured myself a last finger of whiskey, doused the lantern, and settled into the creak of my chair when it came 3 sharp raps at my door. The sound cut through the stillness like a gunshot. My hand froze halfway to the glass. Nobody called at my cabin this late. Not neighbors, they lived miles away. Not friends, I didn't have many left, which meant it was trouble. Trouble always had a way of finding me, even out here at the far edge of the county. I set the glass down, slid my Colt from its holster on the table, and moved slow toward the door. The knocks came again, harder this time. Hurried, desperate. My pulse thudded in my ears. I thumbed the hammer back, eased the latch, and yanked the door wide with the barrel raised. What I saw wasn't what I expected. A girl stood there, no more. Than 16. She was pale under the moonlight, hair tangled and full of dust, her dress torn and smeared dark with blood. Not her blood. I realized at least not all of it. She clutched a leather satchel to her chest like a newborn, knuckles. White, eyes wild. "They're coming," she gasped, her voice cracking with fear. "Please let me in." I ought to have shut the door right then. A man alone on the frontier learns to mind his own business. But there was something in her eyes, something raw, pleading, and desperate enough to break through the wall I'd built around myself years ago. Against better judgment, I lowered the gun, stepped aside, and let her stumble past me into the cabin. The smell of sweat and iron followed her in. She collapsed against the table, breathing hard, still clutching that satchel. I barred the door behind her, my gut already twisting. Whoever she was running from would be close, and I'd just picked a side without knowing the first thing about it. I knelt beside her. "Who's after you?" Her lips trembled. Her eyes darted toward the window, scanning the darkness. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If they catch me, if they get this..." She hugged the satchel tighter. "It'll be worse than death." Her words didn't make sense yet, but I felt the truth in them. I was no stranger to danger. I'd seen my share of blood spilled on this land. But this was different. This girl hadn't stumbled here by chance. Fate had driven her straight to my door. And outside, somewhere in the dark, the danger that hunted her was already closing in. I just didn't know yet how many men it would take, or how many bullets I had left to stop them. The cabin was dark, the only light spilling in from the moon's pale glow through the cracks in the shutters. I'd barely had time to ask the girl her name when the sound came faint at first, like distant thunder rolling across the desert. But thunder doesn't have rhythm, and thunder doesn't shake the ground beneath your boots. Hoofbeats. I moved to the window, pulled the curtain back with the barrel of my Winchester, and peered out. My stomach sank. A dust cloud swirled on the ridge, and in it, I saw them riders, at least a dozen strong, pounding hard in our direction. Even in the dim light I could make out the glint of rifles, the wild sway of horses driven at full gallop, and the unmistakable red scarf of the man leading them. The girl, crouched low on the floor, whispered with a shiver in her voice, "They'll kill me if they find me." "Who are they?" I asked, though I already had a suspicion. "The Red Vulture Gang." The name was like a weight on my chest. Everyone on this side of the territory had heard of them. Cutthroats and marauders, more beast than man. They robbed banks, slaughtered stagecoaches, and strung up anyone who crossed them. Lawmen feared them. Civilians prayed never to see their shadows. And now they were riding straight for my cabin. Through the window, I watched as they spread out, fanning wide across the ridge like a pack of wolves circling prey. Their leader, Vulture Jack himself, sat tall in the saddle. That red scarf across his face was as much a calling card as the pile of bodies he left behind after every raid. His hand went up, and the riders slowed, forming a wide ring around the cabin. I tightened my grip on the Winchester. My cabin was sturdy, built from thick timber, but it wasn't a fort. With enough fire and bullets, they'd splinter it to pieces in minutes. The girl crawled closer, clutching my sleeve. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them take me." I almost told her the truth, that I wasn't looking to die for a stranger, that I'd lived this long by keeping my head down and my door shut. But when I looked into her eyes, wide, and filled with terror, yet stubborn with something stronger, the words died in my throat. Outside, a rider bellowed, "She's in there." The others answered with a chorus of wild whoops, their voices carrying across the desert like the cries of scavenger birds. The hoofbeats grew louder again as they began closing in. Tightening the noose dot, I chambered around with a sharp click-clack. "Stay low," I growled. She nodded, holding that satchel as though it were her soul itself. As the gang drew closer, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I'd already made my choice the moment I opened that door. Whether the first liked it or not, her fight was now mine. And the night was about to bleed.